Oh, good morning, protege, or of course, good afternoon. So my wonderful eighth period class. Hey, I hope this direct instructional Zoomcast finds you well. So this is going to be my direct instruction for Tuesday. And this, of course, is October, or as I like to say in Mr. Bonk's world, Rocktober 19th, 2021. Let's get into it, shall we? You guys know the drill at this point. So again, you need to have your ISN open, please. In addition, besides your ISN, you need a blue or black pen. You need multiple colored highlighters. I want you guys highlighting now multiple colors. And of course, your correctable tape, and which honestly, you don't need to be using the correctable tape or the highlighters. You should be using that after you complete the entire Zoomcast, because I really want you to focus and provide your undivided attention on the direct instruction. All right. So on the right side, of course, you've dated your notes already. It's October 19, 2021. It's 2 for Tuesday, 2 for Tuesday. I say double the pleasure. You say double the fun. Topic heading, top line, write down Roaring Twenties. This is going to be, I think, a really fun direct instructional Zoomcast, because as I'm finishing up these new inventions that transform folks' lives in the Roaring Twenties, you're going to see the emergence of what we call pop culture, popular culture, something that Americans did not witness and enjoy in previous generations. So we learned in the previous Zoomcast, you learned about the refrigerator, how the refrigerator is going to replace the icebox. Now remember, I left you with a question, a cliffhanger. They both do the same thing. They both preserve and keep your food cold and fresh. But why is the refrigerator better than an icebox? We're going to get there. All right. Another new invention. Let's talk about the vacuum cleaner. So the vacuum cleaner also was introduced during the Roaring Twenties, again, becoming increasingly more and more popular. So I want you to look at these two options. Number one, on the left side, you have what people used prior to the vacuum cleaner, and that's a broom. On the right side is an Oreck XL21. Mr. Bonk has an Oreck in his house. It's a wonderful vacuum cleaner. Now, they both basically do the same thing. So what do you think is the benefit of a vacuum cleaner as compared to a broom? Why don't you pause the Zoomcast, draw a line off to the side, take 30 seconds, and add some oral notes. I'd like you to do that. I, of course, am going to continue on because I have the luxury of knowing you can pause the Zoomcast anytime you want. If I'm going too quickly, pause it. If you miss something, rewind it. All right, here's another new invention. You have, of course, the washing machine. It's going to be introduced and become very, very popular in the Roaring Twenties. George Westinghouse was the big player. So once again, I want you to notice there's two photographs. On the left is a group of women washing clothes by hand in wash tubs. On the right side, you have what we call a front end washing machine. Mr. Bonk and Mrs. Bonk have one of these. They're wonderful. So once again, I want you to pause the Zoomcast and draw a line off to the side. Take 30 seconds. What do you think is the benefit of having a washing machine compared to washing your clothes by hand? You're doing the same thing, but what's the benefit? I'm going to continue on. Finally, what about this invention? What about the sewing machine? Also becoming increasingly more and more popular during the Roaring Twenties. So once again, prior to the sewing machine, this is an old-fashioned sewing machine that's probably 100 years old. On the left side, this is what people did to go and fix their clothes or to make their own clothes, and it was called using needle and thread, as this young lady was doing here in the photograph. I should say in the illustration, it's not a photograph. So once again, the young lady with needle and thread doing the same thing as the sewing machine. How is the sewing machine better? Draw a line off to the side. Take 30 seconds. Pause the Zoomcast. Add a side oral note. I want you guys doing more of that. Don't just focus on just the notes that you're writing down from the bullet notes. Add additional information. You're going to need to do that when you guys make the transition to Stevenson. I, of course, am going to continue on. All right. So what's the end result? So again, you've got the refrigerator replacing the icebox. You have the vacuum cleaner replacing the broom, basically, ostensibly. You have the washing machine replacing washing clothes by soap and hand with a wash tub. You have the sewing machine replacing using needle and thread. So what happens as a result? All of these inventions, you see a pattern developing. So number one, well, first of all, before we get into the pattern, here's what's going to start to happen. For the first time in American history, Americans are going to practice what we call materialism. Material, things. What Americans are going to start to do in the Roaring Twenties, now 100 years ago, is they're going to use your vernacular, not mine. They're going to start buying stuff. Today, everybody's got to have the latest cell phone. Everybody's got to have the latest smartphone. Everybody wants the biggest, nicest television. People want better earbuds or headphones now. Paying hundreds of dollars for that really nice Bose headphones. I get it. But 100 years ago, they didn't have those things. The things that people were buying were the washing machines, the sewing machines, the vacuum cleaners, washing machines. I already said that, excuse me, and the refrigerators. There we go. But here's the key. You want to put an asterisk by this one. This is what you should have figured out. The benefit of having a washing machine as compared to washing your clothes by hand, it's real simple. You now have time. It's time consuming to wash your clothes by hand. You got to scrub them. You got to rinse them. Whereas now with the washing machine, you just take your dirty clothes, put it inside your washing machine, add soap, hit your program, whites, dark colored clothes, and away you go. So as a result of all these new inventions, what's happened is people now have time. And what they have time to do was something that people 20, 30, 40, 100 years ago never had time to do. This is the beginning of having fun. So for the first time in American history, people now have the luxury. They have the ability to actually do something fun besides just working, eating, and sleeping. And so what are they doing? So ladies and gentlemen, in the Roaring Twenties, if you would direct your attention to the overhead screen, this is one of the few video clips you are not required to take notes on. Watch the video clip. I want you to notice what people are doing to have fun. And can you figure out there are several points where people are doing something illegal, at least in the 1920s. And remember we talked about flappers? Way back at the beginning of this unit, look for the flappers in here.
What a marvelous age we live in. Heartbeat, fire in the middle. Heartbeat, four man's riddle. Heartbeat, sizzling soup. Oh, what will I do? Wax, dilly, bop, bop, bop. Heartbeat, stinging like a busy bee. Drop beat, smoke like a chimney. Hot heat, burns heavily, nearly makes furnace out of me. Heartbeat, and I want 'em in hot, 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 hot. White heat, that's the way they have got. Heartbeat, Charleston's doing it. Shot beat, black bottom ruined 'em. Heartbeat, hear him yell. Oh, what's so hot beat?
What a great video. Boy, did it truly encapsulate the essence, the zeitgeist of the 20s. So a couple of takeaways. Number one, did you happen to catch what they were doing illegally? It's not illegal today, but it was in those days. They were drinking alcohol. They're breaking the 18th Amendment, the Volstead Act, prohibition. Two, You saw lots of flappers in the video. Flappers were these young girls that were pushing the envelope in terms of what was considered to be appropriate social norms. Again, wearing clothes that were much shorter in terms of length, wearing mascara, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and even dancing. And the dance they were doing was the most popular dance of the Roaring Twenties. It was called the Charleston. And by the way, new genre of music is going to be introduced in the Roaring Twenties. It's a style of music or a genre of music that I listen frequently to in class when you guys are doing assignments. And that, of course, is jazz. Let's continue on. Now, what else did people do in terms of having fun besides going out, dancing the Charleston, and yes, sometimes illegally drinking alcohol or listening to jazz? Another very popular activity or recreation back in the Roaring Twenties was listening to the radio. Because now, mom, who basically ran the house, didn't have to devote all this time to washing clothes or sweeping the floor with a broom or waiting for the iceman to come to restock and replenish the ice in the icebox. She's got time like everybody else. So everybody would all gather in their living room. They used to call them parlors in those days. And they would sit around and listen to that. It was called the radio. So my mom tells me stories, my dad did too, that back in the 1930s, radio was still very, very popular. Television is still another, I would say another 20 years into the future. So for example, one of the most popular radio programs that people listened to was The Lone Ranger. This very interesting gentleman with a mask on. Hi-Yo Silver was his horse. Away! By the way, Lone Ranger started out as a radio program. They made it into a television program, and they even did a movie about the Lone Ranger starring the great Johnny Depp. One of the most popular radio programs was a program called The Shadow. This was a program that my mom talked about that she loved to listen to when she was a little girl, was very popular still even into the 1930s. So the Shadow was this mysterious figure that, again, wore this big black cap and he had a mask covering up his face, kind of like Theodore Roosevelt when he was the police commissioner of Gotham City. And he was out to stop the bad guys. And he had the ability to change your thoughts and cloud your thoughts. So here's what we're going to do. Going to have a little fun. I want you to skip a full page. I want you to go to the right side of the next clean sheet of paper. Make certain that you date your notes again for today. It's Tuesday. It's October 19th, 2021. And I want you to write down for me guide questions to Shadow. So this is not going to be a video clip. This is going to be an audio clip. So I'm going to provide you some guide questions to assist you with your note taking. Are you ready? Here we go. Number one. As you're listening to this audio cast, again, of one of the episodes of The Shadow, I want you to explain for me what special effects did they incorporate to scare their audience and create a mood. Remember, folks, you can't watch this on television. Television is still another decade or two into the future. No internet in those days. So if you're listening to a scary radio program, and The Shadow was a very scary program, how did they try to heighten your senses, your sense of fear or foreboding? What special effects did they use to create a certain mood, if you will? Number two, the episode I'm going to play, I'm not going to play the whole episode, is called The Circle of Death. So I want you to explain for me, what was the plot? What was the story behind it? Are you ready? All right, here we go. I'm not going to play the whole thing. This audio cast is actually almost 10 minutes long. It's about 9 minutes and 34 seconds long. I'm only going to play a couple minutes of it. You ready? The Shadow knows.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? Shadow knows. Home presents The Shadow, the mystery man who strikes terror in the very hearts of sharpsters, lawbreakers, and criminals. Ladies and gentlemen, when you hear The Shadow's blood-curdling laugh, you can be sure that exciting entertainment will follow. And here's something else that you can be sure of. When you buy Blue Coal, you're getting the finest of Pennsylvania hard coal. The harmless blue coloring that identifies Blue Coal is your guarantee of clean, even, safe, dependable heat all winter long. So don't take chances. Insist on Blue Coal, as quoted by name. Phone your order to your nearest Blue Coal dealer tomorrow. And be sure to hold on for John Barclay's important message at the end of this program.
Listen for the special effects.
The pop murder announced for today has been postponed. Today, the circle of death.
Oh, Jack, what a delightful show. What a wonderful way to start our honeymoon.
Darling, when it comes to shows and girls, I'm a small figure. Now I can be big and nightclub. Oh, Texas. Hey, Texas.
Darling, I think you're wonderful. I've never had such a marvelous time in my life.
Hop in, honey.
Well, things are pretty quiet around the theater district tonight, Bill.
Yeah, pretty thin crowd.
I don't blame folks for staying away. After those 3 bombings and 15 people being blown to pieces, I wouldn't be here myself if it wasn't the commissioner's orders.
Same here. Boy, has this town got the jitters.
Commissioner Weston's hopping around like a cat on a hot stove.
I hear the Midtown Association is going to ask for his resignation if you don't catch the nut that's scattering bombs around here like confetti on New Year's Eve.
The guy that's pulling these jobs sure must have it in for a lot of people.
He's a real screwball, if you ask me. Look at the way he's always sending warnings to the newspapers before he blows another batch of pedestrians to Haiti.
Yeah. Have you noticed? He always ends his notes by saying, I hate crowds.
Well, this is the time that crazy group warned he'd set off another blast.
Maybe his watch is slow.
Things are going to pop if he pulls another job and kills some more people.
Well, maybe all the cops have him scared off.
Maybe.
Bill, look at that car. Blown to smithereens.
As killer strikes again. Fire for a stand. Get your panic ready. Panic. Read all about the mad maniac fighting.
It's horrible, Lamont, horrible.
Senseless and insane, Marco. Crimes like this always are. Turn on the radio, it's time for news bulletin. A switch on the dashboard.
Inefficiency of the police department. Tonight at Midtown Hall, a meeting of businessmen of the entertainment world and property owners is in progress. Police Commissioner Weston has been asked to defend his department and produce results or resign.
That's enough, Marco.
Washington, D.C.
Now listen carefully.
Yes, Lamont.
I want you to go to that protest meeting right over there at Midtown Hall. Commissioner Weston is speaking. I've got a pretty slow to take this explanation of the business department to catch this thief.
I'm sure.
Now, here's what I want you to do. Keep quiet. Watch your chance. Then I want you to cry out that Shadow could solve this crime without half trying.
Aren't you flattering yourself?
Never mind that, Margot. I have a very definite reason for doing this. A lot depends on your getting the crowd to take up your suggestion.
I'll do my best, Lamont. But where are you going?
I won't be far away. Hand me that other case on the floor.
Here you are. Am I permitted enough womanly curiosity to ask what's in it?
Just a little wiretapping device.
Telephone?
No. Now, Commissioner Weston will be talking over the loudspeaker system in Midtown Hall. Don't be surprised if the Shadow interrupts his speech. Now, remember, Margot, cry out at the psychological moment. Hundreds of lives depend on it.
I'll explain to you every available resource of the police department has been thrown into catching this thief. Our task force controls the city. Every known criminal with psychopathic tendencies has been
voted up as questioned. Not one fragment of a bomb has been found. No buildings have been damaged. No one person has been singled out for death. This is not an ordinary crime. We are not dealing with an ordinary criminal. Alibi! Alibi! We've had enough 15 people dead. 58 for you folks. God, business is at a standstill. The whole city's upset. Epic galore resign. But don't get out to the man who puts some of the brazen and the Texas maniac. You've already tried to get him.
The sheriff can solve this crime without half trying.
There's an idea. The shadow. There's the shadow, Lieutenant. Right places for you before. Why did they call it in? You and not the two months to do a better job of it than the police. And the shadow, my son, what a father. Killing us. You've done nothing in 2 weeks. You're all sick. Wait a minute. Hold on. What makes you think this man who calls himself the shadow is interested in law and order? He doesn't crap money and criminals, Patsy. Yeah, he's tipped us off occasionally. But it may have been to get rid of rivals. We have no assurance he isn't a criminal himself. Oh, a thief can catch us. I don't run my department that way. You're not running it at all. That's a matter of opinion. I was asked here to tell you what we've been doing. You seem to think my department works with the shadow. We don't. We never have. And as for the shadow, and you, reporter, can spread it all over the front pages, I challenge him to uncover one single scrap of evidence that my men have overlooked. I challenge the shadow to find this man. I am the shadow. I accept that challenge, Commissioner West. I am working on the team. Gentlemen of the press, it will not be necessary for you to find the commissioner's challenge. But you can bring this challenge to the all being behind the reign of terror. Bring this, gentlemen. The shadow will trend the mass killer walk through the central arcade during the rush hour between 5 and 6 tomorrow night. Remember, the central arcade between 5 and 6 tomorrow night. I dare him to come to walk through the central arcade.
So any takeaways? That was hard for you guys, I would imagine. You know, your generation's a very visual generation. But again, folks back in the 20s and even into the 1930s without television, when you're listening to a radio program, you had to use your imagination. You had to imagine and listen really carefully. So think about some of the special effects they had to incorporate to create and set the mood, to set the tone. The music in the background, the sound effects, even the way the actors were able to use their voices to create a certain feeling and atmosphere. Again, you have to really use your imagination to understand and appreciate the true story with regards to the shadow and the circle of death. Let's continue on. Because ladies and gentlemen, only the shadow knows. Now, here's another important change. Go back to the previous page, please. Good job. So again, I told you guys, you're going to like the Zoomcast because it's really focusing a lot on pop culture, popular culture. So again, another big change in the Roaring Twenties. You've got more time on your hands. You don't have to be washing clothes by hand. You don't have to sweep the floor with a broom. You don't need to mend your clothes or fix your clothes or create clothes with a needle and thread. You got the sewing machine. All these new inventions are giving you more time. So besides sitting around listening to the radio and listening to the shadow, you're also watching sports, sometimes participating, sometimes actually going to the game. So who are some of the really popular key players of sports figures back at this time? So number one of the key players was a gentleman by the name of Harold Red Grange. He was given a lot of credit. If you follow professional football, football was in its infancy 100 years ago. And Red Grange is given a lot of credit in really putting football on the map. Number two, Boxing was very, very popular back in the 1920s. And there was probably no boxer more popular in the 1920s than a gentleman by the name of Jack Dempsey. And then finally, the sport that was king back in the Roaring 20s, 100 years ago, was baseball. And there was no figure more popular, bigger than a guy by the name of George Herman Ruth. We, of course, know him as Babe Ruth. So let's break them down. Number one, that, of course, is a photograph of Harold Red Grange. Now, Harold Red Grange, of course, as I said, really put football on the national map, in this national spotlight. Another thing about Harold Red Grange, he was born and raised in Wheaton. So Wheaton's about, let's see, so I'm 21 miles away. I'm in Roselle. Wheaton's probably about another 6 miles from me, southwest of me. So Wheaton, again, is between 25 and 30 miles, basically southwest of Buffalo Grove. This is Red Grange Field, named after Red Grange at Wheaton Warrenville High School. Number two, Jack Dempsey, boxer. Jack Dempsey, again, was the heavyweight champion of the world. Jack Dempsey also had a very interesting cultural and ethnic background. Jack Dempsey was part Irish. Remember we talked about Irish immigration? On his father's side of the family, he was also part Jewish, and he was also part Cherokee Indian. He was also a member of the indigenous people. So I got a little special surprise for you. I'm going to share with you a video clip, another one. And this one, again, you're just going to watch. This is an actual boxing match. Took place in 1919, a year after World War I had ended. And it's between Jack Dempsey, the challenger, and the heavyweight champion of the world, Jess Willard. Now, Jack Dempsey was not a big guy. He was probably about 5'8", maybe 5'9", maybe 5'10", with maybe some boots on, but he was not a big guy, and he was probably well under 100, 200 pounds at this point, between I would say 170, 180. The guy that he was opposing in this fight was Jess Willard, a heavyweight champion. Jess Willard was a foot taller than Jack Dempsey. He was 6'7", which was huge. It's big for today. It was huge back then. Watch what happens when these two boxers meet on the 4th of July, 1919, to determine the new heavyweight champion of the world. And you might want to count how many times Jess Willard is knocked down by Jack Dempsey. Here we go.
The reigning heavyweight champion, 6'7" Jess Willard, defending his crown against the underdog contender, Jack Dempsey. It was a hot Independence Day at the Toledo Arena in Toledo, Ohio, 110 degrees. And as you watch Dempsey and Willard, you can see a distinct difference in boxing style and strategy from some 70 years ago.
Well, you can almost see a transition here. The champion, Jess Willard, is the old stand-up straight Marcus de Queenberry style that was the way they fought in those days. Dempsey is a transition period. He is an animal. He's a panther. He's well-tanned. He's strong, and he's crouching, bobbing, and weaving. He's doing all the things we do today. He had to get in there under the reach of this tall guy, and remember, he's got to destroy him.
And there's the first knockdown of the round as Jess Willard is put down by Jack Dempsey.
First thing to notice here is Willard is just barely up when Dempsey has attacked him. In those days, you could do that. You could just hang around. Now watch Dempsey. He doesn't move away. Even the referee's not pushing him.
No rules at the time concerning the boxer going to the neutral corner. And another onslaught by Dempsey. That's the third time that Willard has gone down in the round. And obviously there is no 3 knockdown rule in effect.
In those days, if you could get up, no matter what, now watch. Willard has his back turned, and even with his back turned, Dempsey knocks him down for the 4th time.
And Jack Dempsey's entire purse of $27,500 riding on stopping Willard in the first round.
And he's certainly trying as hard as he can. All this time, major physical damage is being inflicted on Willard. Willard continues to get up, and Dempsey is getting arm weary. And he's got a great sense of urgency. He knows he's got seconds to go in order to get Willard out of there and win his bet.
Willard in trouble again on the ropes right here. And Willard is put down for the 6th time in the round. Now, he's apparently counted out, but saved by the bell. Unbelievably, he gets up again, and he is smothered again by Dempsey. Now, Jess Willard did survive the first round, but could not answer the bell for round 4. So Dempsey won the title, but lost the bet.
So a couple of takeaways. 7 times in one round, Jess Willard was knocked down by Jack Dempsey. Again, do you see the big size disparity between the two of them? Jack Dempsey was almost a foot shorter than him and probably 50 to 100 pounds lighter. And yet you saw a different style of boxing. And then 2, as they pointed out, basically Jack Dempsey wagered that he could knock Jess Willard out in the first round. So his purse, in other words, what he was going to make from the fight was $27,500, which in those days was an incredible sum of money. He ended up losing the purse because he couldn't knock Jess Willard out in the first round, but he did go on to win the fight and became the heavyweight champion of the world, the most popular boxer, no doubt in my mind, back in the Roaring 20s, Jack Dempsey. Finally, then you got to talk about Babe Ruth. Now, as I said, baseball was huge in the Roaring 20s. It's still popular today, but it doesn't hold the same cachet it once did. And many people would argue, in a good way, of course, that it was Babe Ruth who really put baseball on the map. And remember, people were watching baseball games 20, 30 years before that. But what he did was he brought thousands of people into the fold. Again, the story was that when they built Yankee Stadium, the nickname they used to give it was called the house that Ruth built because of all the money he generated, because people wanted to watch Babe Ruth play baseball. So let's continue on. And if you direct your attention to the overhead screen, that's a photograph of George Herman, but nobody ever called him by his formal name. Everybody called him Babe Ruth. So I'm going to share another video clip with you guys. This video clip is called Babe Ruth's Called Shot. It was a home run he hit in the 1932 World Series. He played for the New York Yankees. Let's see if you can figure out what team the Yankees were playing in 1932 in the World Series.
Babe's number one, there's no question. He was one of the very greatest hitters ever. The 1932 series is Babe's last, yet it produces his greatest moment.
Babe Ruth in 1932, I think did. Warren did not call his shot off Charlie Root.
Yeah. Oh, what a moment.
I'll never forget it. It was a tough series. Both clubs riding each other, doing everything to get each other's goat. Well, I had this one particular time when I went to bat, Charlie Root was pitching.
Yelling from the Cub dugout was positively sulphurous, as well as from the fans. They were in on this. This was a Chicago crowd, and they were throwing things and yelling. Ruth was standing in the batter's box, yelling back at them between pitches.
And the first pitch ball was a called strike. Well, I thought it was outside and didn't like it very much.
More yelling, back and forth. Strike 2, more yelling.
Well, I didn't like that one either, so I let it go by. Well, I stepped out of the box, and by that time, they were over there going crazy.
The volume coming from the stands was so loud that some of the Cub players were running out of the dugout and cupping their hands over their mouths to make sure Ruth heard them. And then he makes his famous gesture.
Well, I looked down at center field, and I tore him. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball right past the flagpole. Well, good Lord, must have been with me.
I have seen the motion picture film, which they brought up, made by some amateur, which seems to have Babe Ruth's arm in motion. I don't know whether he called it or not.
Gabby Hartman was a catcher. He was right there. He knew what was going on. Said, no, he wasn't pointing to the stands. He's pointing to the bench and talking back to the bench because they were riding him pretty hard. He just pointed 2 fingers at the dugout. Said, that's only 2 strikes. He wasn't pointing. He was pointing to the dugout. Well, it made a great story.
A lot of people have said he didn't, and it's going to be one of those things for the rest of our lives. Did he or did he not? I would say he did. I saw him point the bat out. I would say he called it. But it would not be at all technical or rude. He was not a showboat. He let his back talk for him. I'm sure he didn't call the shot.
I will go to my grave not knowing for sure, but frankly not giving a damn. I'm glad the legend exists. That I am sure.
Quick little side note about Babe Ruth. So in 1927, Babe Ruth was not only the highest paid Major League Baseball player. In 1927, he was making more than then President Calvin Coolidge. So one of the writers went up to Babe Ruth and said, "Hey, Babe, you know, how do you feel about the fact that you're making more money than the President of the United States was?" And Babe Ruth paused, barely blinked, and said, "You know what? I had a better year than he did." And there you have it, sports fans. So I hope you enjoyed today's Zoomcast. This is a lot of fun. Again, I think that pop culture is something that's really important to understand the zeitgeist, the flavor of a decade. That's why I spent time talking about sports and radio and dancing. That's important if you want to understand the decade. So at this point, what I'd like everybody to do, you're going to take out your correctable tape. You're going to go through your ISN. You're going to clean up anything you crossed out, traced over. I want it cleaned up. There's no doodling or no drawing in your ISN. You guys have gotten much better at that compared to the beginning of the year. There's still a few of you. We have to work with you on that. This is not an art class. No offense. This is a social studies class. Then remember, multiple colored highlighters. Don't just focus on one. Tip it to tip. Focus on those words you can visualize in your mind, your persons, places, and things. As you're highlighting your notes, remember, don't forget the guide questions too from the video clip on the shadow. Yes, I want you to highlight those guide questions because that reinforces the notes that you take. When you're done, remember, 10 to 15 minutes every day. You got to go back and review your ISN. Again, you practice for basketball, you practice for soccer, you practice for cricket. Why aren't you practicing for school every day? It's no different. Again, think about the analogy I've given before. You get the two people working out. The one person works out on a treadmill 5 days a week for 15 to 30 minutes. The other person works out once a week for 2 hours. Which one's going to get in shape? You know the answer. It's the former, not the latter. If you have an opportunity, please hand your ISN to somebody in your house, your mom, your dad, an older brother or sister who had me, maybe an aunt or an uncle that had me decades ago. And you teach them the content. You channel your inner Mr. Bond. Talk about these new inventions like the vacuum cleaner and the washing machine and how it changed people's lives, how it gave people to go out and have fun, to listen to jazz, to dance to Charleston, to go to sporting events, to go watch a baseball game, go watch Babe Ruth, go listen to a boxing match on the radio, listen to Jack Dempsey, or go to a football game and go watch Harold Red Grange, who, by the way, ended up going to play for a college, University of Illinois, and then he ended up signing a professional contract with this brand new football team. Maybe you've heard of them. They're called the Chicago Bears. There you have it. So again, I hope you enjoyed today's Zoomcast as much as I enjoyed making it. I'm going to keep doing it because I really think it gives you the opportunity of working at your own pace and really getting to understand and master the content really well. So again, as I always like to say, as I wrap up one of my Zoomcasts, you know, the story may have ended today, but you know the saga is going to continue tomorrow. And the rest, as we say, everyone is history. Peace out, everybody. Thank you. Be well.